full-fledged front-end interview, the guy asked me questions on promises. And that guy just kept asking me more questions on promises. He just recognized my weakness and he kept on exploiting it, yeah. Where you can go and enter the company's name. And I think they're going to provide you with the template of that particular company. For example, if I'm working at Cast24, they're going to provide you first.last at cast24.com.
Hey everyone, welcome to JS Cafe. And in this podcast, we have Piyush Agarwal, aka the Roadside Coder. So in this podcast, we discuss many topics, and I am damn sure that all of these discussions are definitely going to help you in your career. So without wasting any time, let's get started. Hey Piyush, welcome to JS Cafe.
Hi Vedant, thanks for inviting me to your podcast. So excited to be here. This is going to be my first podcast. So yeah, thanks for inviting me. And this going to be, better place to start with. So yeah.
Yep. I'm also really excited to have you for the podcast. And so let's quickly start with a quick and short introduction of yours. I know most of my friends already know you, but just for the sake of formality.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, my name is Piyush Agarwal and I am a front-end developer at Cast24. And I love to teach, specifically web development. You may know me as a Roadside Coder on my YouTube channel, right? And so I love to travel as well. Hence the name Roadside Coder, because I'm always on the road. So yeah, that's some quick introduction from me.
Okay, so the mystery is finally revealed. I was always wondering why a roadside coder, but haven't interacted with you right now. So today I got to know.
Yeah,
Really interesting.
I think this is the first time that I'm saying this, publicly. Or not that it matters, but yeah.
Yeah. A secret confession: I have already binge watched all of your videos. So
Thanks. Thank you so much. I love your content equally. Yeah.
thank
You're doing a great job.
So let's make this podcast productive for the viewers. So I'll start with something about front end. So Piyush, how did you get inclined towards the front end?
Got it. Okay, so regarding front end, so I've worked on front end as well as back end, both of the sides. But my answer could be similar to what like most of the people say, that I like to see things visually when I'm working on them. So yeah, that's the major thing about it. Before starting web development or basically front end, I did some game development as well on Unity. But that time I quickly realized that there's not a really good market for that in India, right? Right now it's booming right now, I guess, in some way. But yeah, that time, so I decided to switch to JavaScript or React or something. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, so what was was it backend first you got introduced with and then front end, or was it vice versa?
No, first front end, yeah, definitely, yeah.
What made you hate backend?
I don't hate backend, but yeah, you could say I love front end more. So yeah, it's equal love for both of them. Just front end is the primary chick, back end is the side chick.
So regarding backend, which language did you pick?
I picked Node.js because obviously JavaScript. So
Now,
what better way to start backend? Yeah,
JavaScript.
So yeah, so basically when I was in my learning phase, I learned MERN stack. So completely React, Node Express, React.
Great stuff.
Sorry, MongoDB. Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with how did you get started with front end development? What were your like baby steps?
Okay, so this was about 2020 May. So I was doing my master's in computer application, MCA, and COVID had hit that time, right? So I was obviously in my hometown, and I was wondering what I'm supposed to learn to get placed, right? Because I wasn't into coding much. This might be a surprise to a lot of people, but in my college days, I didn't do coding at all, zero. So I started in around May 2020, and around that time, React, everyone was talking about React, right? So I wondered what this thing is. So I just, straight up jumped into React. Didn't care about HTML, CSS, or JavaScript. Like I straight up jumped into React and started watching few tutorials. I didn't even install Node.js or NPM. I was wondering, like, where am I going wrong? Like I'm not able to install NPM or anything like packages or like things like that. So somehow I figured that out and I started learning React. But yeah, again, I was having so many issues because I didn't, get my basics right. So then yeah, so I had a conversation with one of my friend. He suggested me the roadmap that you should start with HTML, CSS, JS first, and then move on to React. So yeah, that's what I did. I started with the HTML, CSS first. I gave that plenty of time uh, in building UI stuff, and then I moved on to the logic part. So initially, I used to think that the way a lot of people think that JavaScript and Java are similar, but that was not the case. Right? That was the reason that I started React right away. So then I started JavaScript. I learned good amount of JS and then moved to React, and then things started making sense to me. So that's basically how it all started.
I think that was also necessary because once you realize the power of frameworks like React, then you are more inclined to know how things are working behind the scenes. And
Yes.
like usually, when you see the roadmaps, they talk about HTML, CSS, JS, and React. But in real life, what happens is first you get introduced to React, you see the magic, and then you start digging up things. Okay, this happens like this. What is hosting? How is Closure working? What's all? So
Right.
the power of React is what the motivation behind is to learn JavaScript and other concepts. If you
Exactly.
ask someone read JavaScript, understand it, he will not have interest until he realizes what powerful thing you can build up using that concepts.
Right. Also, like I've seen a lot of people just suggesting, you get started with web development right away. What I would suggest is you need to be very good in coding fundamentals first. Like even when you're starting JavaScript, right, you need to do a lot of coding. So a lot of people suggest that don't do data structures and all those things. So data structure is a huge ocean, right? But we're talking about here the basic stuff like array string, or you need to understand all of these things before moving on to the bigger picture of developing any software or something like that, right? So fundamentals is very important. It's not just that you did HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you learned the syntax, and now you're good to go to create the apps. That's not the case, right? You need to be good in coding fundamentals.
Definitely. Can't agree more on that. So Piyush, during that course, what kind of courses or resources were you consuming to went through the on stuff?
Okay, so like most people, I guess I jumped straight to Udemy to search HTML, CSS course, and I found a really good course by Jonas Schmidtman. I believe his name is Jonas Schmidtman, right? So yeah, that course was really good. I understood a lot of things, like specifically in CSS. So I was pretty weak in CSS. Like I did some amount of HTML, CSS in my college, but that like I was very weak in CSS. Like I used to hate CSS, but that course, made me fall in love with CSS as well. So I, covered everything from edge to edge, and then I decided to move forward to JavaScript. And I took the same course from like the same Jonas Schmidtman's JavaScript course, and that was like one of the best. Like I think till this date, that is one of the best JavaScript course you can find on the internet, with every single little bit of detail, like attention to detail. Right. So that was for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And for React, I think there are so many different resources. I started reading docs first because docs are pretty good. And I remember that time, like on Clever Programmer's channel, if you know Sony, right? Sony Saga, he started teaching on Clever Programmer's channel. It was around June 2020. So I used to, like, I loved his coding style. And, a lot of times when I'm trying to teach something, I try to get inspired. Like I used to get inspired from him a lot. So I try to incorporate his coding styles or, his teaching style a lot. So Sony is one of the individuals that I learned React from. Their code with Mosh, Academia, and so many good teachers. So yeah, multiple different resources basically.
Yep. So, what was the best resource according to you? Was it when you watching? Is reading dog much easier for you, or having it on the video? So, what do you prefer?
See, it depends from doc to doc. That's what I would say. So if you have seen Next.js docs, like it's absolutely amazing. So it has to provide you that experience, right? It has to provide you that roadmap kind of experience that you have to learn like one step at a time. I feel like React Outer DOM has pretty good docs, right? So it depends from like if that technology has good docs or not. And again, if you are able to find good video resources, that I think will be much better than that. But both work alongside. I think there's not a choice. I think you should be learning from both the places, because videos are somewhat abstracted, provide you abstracted information, but the docs will provide you much in depth of the same. Like it's one concept, there are much like there are a lot of APIs for let's say material UI, but a lot of influencers just a lot of teachers discuss only the abstracted part of those things. So yeah, I think docs are equally important.
Yep, makes sense. So video kindly did like scratch the surface of the doc, and when you get to the doc, you realize okay, they have covered only one scenario, but there are n more scenarios. We agree.
Yes, specifically I've seen for these CSS frameworks and libraries, right? These are very necessary to learn from docs, because videos only use the things that are necessary to create that specific app, but docs will take you much more in depth on that concept.
Yep. Totally makes sense. So Piyush, coming back to your college, like what was your best project and how did you make it?
So I would say my best project will be in Stack. I created a chat app, right? So it was by using Mern and Socket.io. So actually, before this project, I had created one more project in Stack. It was a Notes app, but it was the kind of project that I used a lot of resources to build. It was not like entirely of my own, like my own creation. But this second project, this chat app project that I made, was like completely on my own. I didn't see any other resources. Just for Socket.io, I got to learn a lot of things like Socket.io. For UI library, I used I think it was Ant Design, right? So Ant Design or Ant UI, something like that. So that was pretty good learning. So I think that project was pretty good, and I have actually created a complete series on that as well on my channel, like that complete project tutorial series. So I think that project was pretty good. I enjoyed building that project.
Yep. So I think these kind of projects really get you into the actual shoes of front-end development. So
exactly. Also, yeah. So also like one more thing that I'd like to mention is that a lot of people, when they create these projects from the tutorials, right, they would think that okay, I've created this project. Now this project like was made by me, so I'm gonna add this to my resume and declare that I've created this project. So I wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend, okay, while learning whatever project that you're creating, I would recommend you try to learn that, create that project, and then try to create another version of that project all by your own. Like then only you'll be able to understand how things were working behind the scenes. Else you're gonna be blindly following the tutorials, and you're gonna be stuck in this tutorial hell of the tutorial loop.
yeah,
Right.
Yep. I used to do that during college. Like I watched the person used to write 2 lines, then I used to pause the video, write the same. I get some errors, then again I see the video. So, but I realized at that moment, okay, this isn't helping me until and unless I can't write myself the whole code. Then this whole point of development is not making sense, anyways.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, I think most of us go through that phase when we realized, okay, we were able to create the project while watching the tutorial, but after that, we're completely blank. So
Yeah. But during the initial stages, you require that spoon feeding.
yes,
If it's
definitely.
not provided, then I've seen most of my friends getting scared of development. Like if I'm moving, opening a modal on a click of a button, then friends used to ask, "How did you do that?" I used to say this and everything. So they haven't practiced it yet. They haven't went through the pain of building it from their own. Then again, it becomes really a problem, and you run away from development. But
Yes. Yeah. So, but for that, I would say that I wouldn't recommend anyone to follow along the tutorial. I would just recommend that you can watch that tutorial so that you get that, and like you have that on your brain, right? How to, if you will never know how a model is like created or is opened, then you will never know how to create it, right? So just try to watch it so that it's just fed inside your brain, right? So that's when you're trying to create it, you will know that okay, this I encountered this in that tutorial, that okay, this might be the way to build it, and then maybe you can try to Google it or something like that. That's the much more realistic way of building something, like we do in companies, right? We try to Google whenever we get stuck, something like that.
totally can't agree more on this. So Piyush, tell me something about your first internship. How did you land it there, and how did you prepare for that?
Okay, so I would say my first internship was pretty initial. Like I feel like personally that I wasn't ready for that internship, but I was trying to apply to multiple different places. So there was this website that sells medicines, right? It was called, I think, Chemist Smart or something like that. So yeah, I reached out to the founder directly on LinkedIn, and yeah, they hired me for I think it was 4 month internship. Right. So like I at that point I didn't even knew React properly, and they gave me Next.js. They gave me the complete site to migrate from React to Next.js. But fortunately, my teammates were very helpful, and I got incredible learning during that time. Those 3-4 months, I got such an incredible learning, and I think Next.js was also in its initial phase that time. So I got to do some early hands-on on Next.js. So I would say that's pretty good. And yeah, how I landed, as I mentioned, I think as I stress on this fact to a lot of people, that cold emailing is the best way of getting internships or the jobs. So don't undermine cold emailing. So I didn't do this at that time, but now I do this. Like for example, if I'm trying to target a specific company, I would try to get in more information about that particular company, what their vision is, what type of apps they're working on. Right? I would try to create similar projects to that what they're working on, right? And then try to reach out to them. If you're gonna put in the efforts, like it's gonna be much more easier for you. I would say it will help you in your interview process as well, and in during your salary negotiations and everything, right? Because company knows that this guy wants to work for us and has put in that work needed to, he's pretty serious for it. We are not just another company for him. So he's put in some work and he has reached out to us, like cold emailed us, right? So I think these things work out a lot.
For a newcomer, how would you define a cold emailing to someone who isn't aware of this stuff?
So cold emailing is basically just another message or an email you're trying to send to a hiring manager or a talent acquisition person, or even CEOs or CTOs. It's just basically you're trying to text them, like, or message them with your portfolio, your resume. And so on LinkedIn, we have limited characters to write when we try to reach out to someone, right? For coincide an invitation. So I would try to tailor it like to the point. There's no hey, hi involved. Just try to jump straight to the point that I've worked on these many technologies. I've created these many projects. Here's my resume. Here's my portfolio. So I feel like all of these things work out in your favor. If you want to write even more, I think you can provide you like something like I have tailored my portfolio or resume with respect to your company, or you can provide them with some document with more information, right? So that will gain their attention. And yeah, basically, you need to be good in defining the subject lines as well to get their attention if you're on email, right? So yeah, I think these things matter. And if it doesn't work out for one person in that company, try to reach out to another person, and so on and so forth. But I would say just obviously you won't get reply in your first try, right? So you have to mail a lot of company, and in fact a lot of people in one single company as well. Someone or the other will reply to you. And so I think that there's this website called hunter.io where you can go and enter the company's name, and I think they're going to provide you with the template of that particular company. For example, if I'm working at Cast 24, they're going to provide you first.last@cast24.com. So now you know the email of every single person inside that company, right? So that is how you can, know the email of that particular employee, right? So I think this approach works out well. You need to contact them on email, Twitter, what else? LinkedIn. So on all of these three platforms, try to contact them on all three platforms, and I think it will work out great.
Yep. Hunter.io is, I think, a pretty great website.
Yes.
So you landed on this internship via cold emailing, and how did you actually prepare for, like, how was the interview like? Were you very nervous, or like was it smooth as cake?
So they just asked me basics of JavaScript because obviously they were not expecting me to be pretty good in these things. And that position, like I've already made it clear that I'm not really pretty, like I'm not really good in development at that point of time, right? So they didn't stress much about the interview part. They just hired me quickly. So it was about that particular internship. But apart from that internship, like the internship that I applied to next, I think those had good amount of JavaScript involved and some React related questions as well. So yeah, I think during internships it depends from companies to companies. Like if it's a pretty good company, so they will dig down deep, and it's gonna be similar to what a normal full-time employee position interview looks like. But generally, the internship interviews are less, like 1 or 2 rounds.
So it's like usually when you give the first interview, it is easy, but the moment you are stepping more into the zone, the interviews get harder and harder.
So I actually never really stressed in these in internship interviews, but when it comes to full-time interview, I remember when I gave that first full-fledged front-end interview, the guy asked me questions on promises, right? But I didn't have pretty good knowledge of promise at that time. So I fumbled a little bit, and that guy just kept asking me more questions on promises. He just recognized my weakness, and he kept on exploiting it, Yeah. So, you tend to find such interviewers that sometimes, who don't really help you out, who just there to exploit you.
Yep.
And that was pretty bad experience, I would say.
Yeah. And it is actually really devastating if you encounter such interviews at the early stages. So whatever courage you have gathered up till so far, it's all wasted. And you feel like,
Exactly.
yeah, it's terrible. Even I remember one of these kind of interviews, and it was a hell for me. Trust me.
Exactly. Yeah. Right then, but fortunately for me, like one of my friend, he motivated me about this. Like these things happen, and it's pretty common. It like what you need to take from this is that you got good amount of experience, and now you know what you need to work on next, right? So that's how you should proceed from here. Basically, you need to check your concept if they are, where you're weak, where you're good. So every single interview will give you an experience. It's not about if you're going to clear that or not. It's about the experience that you're going to get from that particular interview.
Yep. And adding to that, I remember when I used to give interviews and whatever questions were asked, I used to pen them down, and I just make sure that if someone asks me this question in the next interview, I should not fumble upon this question. So
exactly that is what we should all be doing. Like we should all be gaining every single thing from a failed interview.
Yeah. I think the more you give failed interviews is what makes you more stronger. But again,
I couldn't agree more.
Again, but in a limit. Otherwise, you'll stop giving interviews.
Exactly.
And I of this conversation, I remember one quote like be the senior. Like it was something like मैं कैसे frame करूँ? Help me frame this out, yeah.
So I think it was like be the interview that you always wanted to have, something like that, right? Be the mentor that you never had.
Correct. I think you just nailed it. Cool. Okay. So coming back, if we are talking about these interview stuff, so Piyush, what is your basic strategy, let's say, to prepare for interviews? I know we usually evolve ourselves during the process. So right now, what is your best strategy that you apply to give any interviews?
Okay. So every single time that I decide to prepare for interviews, I try to forget everything that I know and try to start from absolute scratch. Like every single basics, I would just go through them. Like for example, if I'm gonna understand JavaScript, I would just open MDN docs and try to understand every single topic. I would just go through them. Like I would go through them from end to end. Right. So it's very important to cover all of the basics first and then like move on to all the theory and conceptual stuff, right? There are a lot of good resources as well available for JavaScript online on YouTube, like Akshay's series. Like I've tried to create a series of my own on JavaScript interview preparation, right? So those resources can also help, but I feel like more you read docs and the written stuff will help you out a lot in this. So yeah, that's my strategies. I'll try to first cover the basics and then try to watch these video content. And then specifically for JavaScript, I would say a lot of development concepts are overlooked. People just try to understand the concepts of closures and all of those things, and then just try to completely ignore how the apps are built in JavaScript, which is very important. A lot of people might say that, okay, this is not asked in interviews that much, but see, that is the building block of React, right? Or any other framework. So you need to understand that properly and then try to, move on to the framework part. And specifically for framework, try to, cover all of the basics. Like for example, React, try to cover all of the hooks, uh, class-based component, functional-based component. Even if the class-based component is not used that often, but you need to understand that properly because a lot of interviews, they ask you how you can convert this class-based component to function-based component, right? That is pretty important. Also, if you are applying for, let's say, a little senior position or something like that, they ask you questions on performance on SEO related topics are pretty important, like, web vitals and all those things. So yeah, I think I would recommend that, try to go through everything from end to end, first basic, then intermediate, and then advanced. Even if that is not going to be asked at your level of experience, but still, like, I would recommend to go through most of the resources, but because you never know. I remember one of the interviews as a fresher, a company asked me a lot of testing, like jest and all of those things. So like they doubled down on that like heavily. So yeah, I think I would say be prepared for everything.
You never know what you may be asked, because many a times I've seen whatever the role is required, forever if the role is of a tester or much work is required on testing, they would tend to ask React testing library or Jest or other frameworks question. Or if the work is upon security, then they tend to ask upon web security. So I think interviews are really unpredictable these days, and we should always prepare for the worst.
Yes, right. Correct.
So moving on to next question. Piyush, how much CP did in college?
I'm gonna be honest with you. I had no idea what CP was when I was in college. I did some amount of data structures actually, but yeah, I think it was my last year when I was preparing for placement on all those things. But I was not aware of CP. I didn't even know that word that time. But yeah, I think I was pretty good in data structures, like all of the data structures, like trees, graphs. Like I used to do that a lot, but not competitively.
And I guess even for front end, not CP is not much required for interviews.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely not required. Yeah, I mean, it depends from company to company. A lot of MNCs and all, they might have a dedicated round on that, and that's, I guess, is understandable because that is how their interview process is from a long time. But yeah, I think most of the companies don't really require you to
Yeah,
study CP or something like that.
I remember the first FTE role that I applied for. The interviews were completely on JS and they were not covering much of the DSA rounds. So I was really shocked that I have heard so many friends, or I've seen so many friends doing CP all day night, but here I am just answering JavaScript questions and no data structure or no CP at all. So it was a moment of realization for me. Okay, this also exists in interviews. ऐसा भी होता है भाई. So then I told my friends कि front end में they don't ask DSA, and those people who didn't do DSA that time, they've started with front end. So I was kind of a influencer for front end in my college.
Right. Right. That's great, man. Also, like, there can be DSA, but there can be DSA in a clever way involved, right? For example, they might give you some concept to implement in some app. Like, for example, recently I've made a video on that file structure. So in that, when you try to insert some, file or folder, that requires depth first search or breadth first search, right? So that's what I mentioned in that video as well, that these interviews might cleverly integrate DSA in these types of questions. So what's more important is try to make your logic better instead of just mugging up all of these algorithms or concepts. That will help you out anymore.
Totally makes sense. And these kind of clever questions are kind of something you won't find much on internet or any other doc, and it happens by coincidence. So these interviewers are really smart. They frame questions by themselves and they put on to the interviewee. And I similarly faced this question as well when I was interviewing for I remember Postman. So I messed up. I actually messed up that round because I wasn't. I did make the the object and the data structure, but I was just halfway there, and because of the time limit, I couldn't complete it all. So I think
And that's
it's important that you practice hard questions and these kind of questions so that the moment it is put on you during the interview, you don't get nervous and you just finish that question in within the time range. So
yes.
having to know that how to solve that question is a different thing, but solving that question in a time bound is something which comes with practice. So it is really so. We have come to the last question, Piyush. So any advice for the viewers who are watching this video?
Okay. So first advice that I would give you is related to interview itself. Like, cracking the interview is not the main part of the journey. Surviving the company is the main part, right? So while you're in your learning, like as we can see the current scenario, it's not going good. So as you're in your learning journey, try to pick up more and more challenges. As we discussed that question, right? That DSA like integrated question. So when you try to create some projects and try to create some unconventional projects, like for example, you see canva.com, right? Try to create something like Canva. There are some libraries like this, a library called, I remember, react.canva, that allows you to create a similar type of app. So try to take these types of challenges and you're going to automatically encounter things like that will, allow you to brainstorm your mind for these engineering challenges, right? And whenever you encounter such problems, try to break it down in small parts. A lot of people I've seen in interviews that, let's say, if you're asked to create a polyfill for reduce, but they don't know how to do it, right? So they'll try to jump to the final solution. But what they should be doing is try to create, let's say, like what reduce requires. It requires one callback function and initial value. We've created a function first. Okay, we have taken two params. That's it. Then what's the edge case? There can be initial value. There cannot be initial value, right? So we're taking one step at a time. Then we're going to loop through all of the items and call the callback. So this is what I would recommend that your approach should be during the interviews. Also, I would say don't define your roadmap by looking at someone else's roadmap. Like, for example, even if you've heard about my story, try to just take the pointers from me, but try to tailor your own story or your own journey, right? Don't try to compare like that guy was able to do it in 6 months. He was able to learn it in 1 year or 3 months. Just try to take your own time, else you're gonna end up in a bad place or bad work environment. So that's not the ideal scenario, right? So that is what I would recommend, that you should be tailoring your own journey. So listen to everyone, but tailor all those advice on your own and implement that in your life.
Great. I think that was a great advice. Thank you, Piyush, for being on the channel. It was really a fun conversation. And I really liked talking about everything we discussed so far. And it was really a moment where I as well learn a lot of things.
Yes. Likewise. Yeah. Thank you so much, Vedant, for inviting me to this podcast. I really hope the audience got something useful from this. So everyone, do comment down below what you found the most helpful bit from this podcast. And I'll be looking forward to coming back on JS Cafe to talk about more fun and informative stuff. Goodbye.
Great.